In this lecture, I want to introduce you to JavaScript by creating the functionality of displaying and hiding the effect input form that we have on our page. So, to start writing some JavaScript, we first need to create a new JavaScript file. So let's open up our sidebar here again, and then creating a new file called script.js. Okay. We can close up our terminal down here. We are not going to need it for now. Okay, but now just like before with the CSS file, we need to connect the JavaScript file with the HTML file, because otherwise, of course, our HTML has no way of knowing that that JavaScript code that we are going to write actually exists. Now, the way we are going to do this is different from the CSS file. So remember that we linked CSS by using right here. So we use the link tag to link the CSS file, but to connect the JavaScript file, we actually need to go all the way back here. So basically down to the page, and then right before closing the body, so right here, we use the script tag. So script like this, and then we close it automatically like this. Now we could actually also write our JavaScript right here now, so inside the script tag, but instead of doing that, we are going to use the src attribute, and then we simply need to specify the path to our script. So that's again script.js, because it is in the same folder. So give it a save, and with this, we are nicely connected. And so it's time to write our very first line of JavaScript code. So write with me console.log, and then the typical first line of code is always hello world. Give it a save, and of course nothing happens here on the page. However, what we're going to do is to open up this tab here that says console in our developer tools. So open that up, and then you will see here hello world printed to this so-called console. Now, if you, for some reason, close this, remember that you can open it back up by coming here to View and then Developer, and here JavaScript Console, or you can just right-click anywhere, click Inspect, and then here you choose the tab of Console. Let's make it a bit bigger, actually this down here, so we can see it, because in this first part here of this section, we are going to work a lot with the console. So this console is basically a way of viewing the output from our code right here. So whenever we want to see the result of some operation that we're doing in JavaScript, we can log it to the console by writing this console.log right here. And so again, in the beginning of the section, when we are just learning the fundamentals of JavaScript, we will make use of this console.log all the time. However, in this first lecture, I want to already write some code that actually interacts with the page here. So as I was saying at the beginning of the video, we will now basically make this button here work. So whenever we click on it, we will show this form, and then when we click it again, we will make it disappear. So let's make our page a bit smaller here, just like that. And now to get started, we actually need to hide the form to begin with. So when we open up the page, usually there is no form. So just like here. And then only when we click here is when the form opens. Right? And so actually we first need to go back to our CSS to hide that form. So the way that we are going to do this is to create a special class called hidden, and we will then add and remove that class using JavaScript. So let's call this class hidden. And then the way that we hide something with CSS is to again use the display property and then display none. And so that will hide any element that we add this class to. So the hidden class. So let's come to our HTML and add the hidden class to the form. So where is that? Right here. And remember that we can add as many classes as we want to any element. So here we now add hidden, and that's not working. And let me show you why that is. So if we right click here to inspect, and now I need to make it a bit bigger. So right here, you will see that we have the fact form. So basically the main class for this form, and it has also the display property. So it has display flex, and then we also have the hidden class. And so since the fact form class appears after the hidden, it will override this display none that we added here. All right. Now we could solve this in different ways, but the easiest one, which we should really not abuse and only use very occasionally, is this one. So we can write important, and then this style will always take precedence over all other ones that are also applying. So if we give it a save again, then you see that the form is gone and that now this display none is applying and no longer the display flex. All right. So now, of course, the form is gone, but when we click here, then also, of course, nothing happens. So that's what we will fix now. So we will now write the code that will actually make something happen on our page. So reacting to that user click event. So let's close that down here and going to our JavaScript file. So we know that JavaScript is now working on our page, that it's nicely connected because we could see this hello world here. And so now we can start writing some code. Now what I'm going to do in this lecture is to basically simply write the code without much explanation. So there's going to be a lot of new concepts all at once, but don't worry because we will then basically deconstruct what all these different concepts are throughout the rest of this section. So for now, just write the code with me and you will then later start understanding how it actually works all together. But anyway, the first thing that we need to do, just like in CSS, is to actually select some elements. So for that, we write document.querySelector. And then here we write a string, so this text, exactly like the way we select elements in CSS. So we now want to select this button right here. So now we have our first error here because here we need something, but never mind. So again, we now need to select this button here. And we do that just like in CSS by writing a selector like this. So the button that we want to select is this one here. And so let's actually give it another more unique name because this button large, maybe we are reusing it somewhere and we want to make sure that we now have a name that is only really for this button. So let's call it button open. And so now we write it just like we would in CSS. So dot button open. Okay. And so this will now basically return the button. But in order to actually then use it, we need to store it somewhere. So we need to store it in a so-called variable, which I will also call button. Okay. And now in order to react to a click on that button, we need to attach a so-called event handler. So we write button, which is basically this here. So button.add event listener. And then the type of event that we want to listen for is a click. So we write click. So that's the first part, then a comma, very important. And then in the second part of the add event listener, we need to tell JavaScript what should actually happen. So we need to give add event listener some code, and we do that by creating a so-called function. So let's write function, then open and close parentheses, and then open and close curly braces, which automatically happens. And then here we can hit enter. And just like before, let's simply, to get started, only write console.log. And then here we can write click. All right, so make sure that you got the exact same code as I have here, give it a save, and make sure that there are no errors here. And now, when we click this button, we should see this text here, this string of click logged to our console. So let's see, and indeed, there it is. And if we keep clicking, then it keeps adding more clicks down here. However, that's not really helpful, is it? And so instead, let's now actually do something meaningful. So what we want to do, as I explained before, is to use JavaScript to add and remove this hidden class here. So basically, whenever we click on the button, if this form has this hidden class, we want to remove it, but if it doesn't, then we want to add it. So that makes sense, hopefully. And so we can easily do that with JavaScript. So we can say if, and then here we give it a condition. And so here we now basically need to figure out whether this form has the hidden class or not. So to start doing that, we actually need to also select the form. So let's create a new variable called form, and then again document.querySelector. And this form, remember, is called fact form. Okay, and so now we can take that form and we can say form.classList.contains. And then here the name of the class. So in this case, the hidden class. So basically here we are saying if the list of classes of the form contains the hidden class, then we want to do something. So if this is the case, what we want to do is to then remove that class. So form, again, dot class list, and then dot remove. And again, the name of the class. And here, keep in mind that here we are not using the dot. So here we need the dot to select the element, but here it is simply the name of the class. And so now it should already be working, or at least partially. So let's click here, and there is our form. Beautiful. So that's really cool, right? So it means that our logic here worked. So again, whenever the list of classes contains hidden, so if hidden is one of the classes of this element, then we remove it, which will then make the form visible again. Now, if we click again now, then nothing will happen here, because now we need to do the opposite, basically. So what we can do here with this if is to say else. So basically the opposite. So if this is true here, so if it does contain the hidden class, then this happens. But if it does not, so in the opposite case, then JavaScript will go here to this else. So this is how we take decisions using JavaScript. So this if-else block. So basically in this other situation, when the hidden class is not there, we then want to add it back. So that's form.classList.add hidden. And now it should work perfectly fine. So we click, it appears, we click again, and then it disappears, because now we are in this part of the code. So this code will then not run, it will only run this piece of code, because now this here is false, right? And so it works beautifully. There's just one thing that is different from this version, which is that whenever the form is open, here the text changes to close. So we can do that as well using JavaScript. So as I mentioned before, we can manipulate the content of the HTML, we can manipulate classes, and really all we want. So the way we do that is to go to our button again, which we already selected. So remember up here. And so that button is now stored in the variable btn. And now we can use the text content property. And we can set it to close, right? And so now whenever the hidden class is removed, so when the form is shown, then also the text will change to close. Okay, but of course now it stays at close forever, because nowhere in our code we told it to go back to the initial state, right? And so we need to do that here in this second piece of the if-else statement. So button.text content again, and so the original was share effect. And you see that I'm always using these single quotes, And then once I save it, Prettier automatically formats to these double quotes. So it doesn't really matter which ones you use when you write JavaScript. Both of them work basically the same way. So give it a save. And now it's fully functional. Perfect. So with this, you got to see the power of JavaScript and how we can use it to actually manipulate things on our page. But to understand what is actually happening here, so what all this stuff actually is and how it works, we need to understand a couple of fundamental JavaScript concepts. And so let's now go through a quick JavaScript crash course where you will understand things like functions, variables, objects, arrays, and so on. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And so let's now keep going on our journey.